together, they equal a whole chapter and a whole lecture. So I've abbreviated them both. 10 I've taken very small. We're only going to talk about a fraction of chapter 10. What is on the slides, what's on the worksheets, what's on the homework is what you're going to need to know about chapter 10 for the exam. Don't worry about the rest of it. Okay? All right. So let's get started on chapter 9, which is the second market structure that we're going to talk about. Second market structure, first market structure, perfect competition. Second market structure is going to be monopoly. A lot of us know a little something about this market structure already. How many suppliers are in this market? One, right? Monopoly, there's one supplier in the market. So we already know how many suppliers are in the market. There's a reason there's only one supplier in this market. It's going to come from a list of about 3, but really 2 that we're going to focus on today. The biggest reason a monopoly market structure is a monopoly market structure is because there's one supplier. Why is there only one supplier? Because there are barriers to entry into the market. There's a reason there's only one. We're going to talk primarily about the first and the last on this list, and we're going to talk briefly about the one in the middle. In a regular monopoly, which is what we're going to talk about today, when we think about monopoly, the market structure that we're talking about today, we really think about the first and last. First one is there's a legal restriction. There is a patent. There is some sort of a legal restriction that says that only one supplier, this supplier, can produce that good. Usually, they keep their competition out of the market by coming up with one of these legal restrictions in the form of a license or a patent, things like that. The other thing they do is gain control over an essential resource. If you buy up all of a resource that goes into producing this good, well, then you're the only one that gets to produce that good. So it's one of those primary reasons. This is a special type of monopoly that we don't talk too much about in this class. We might talk about it a little in macro when we talk about government policies and things. It's going to be natural monopolies. The barrier to entry for them is economies of scale. Economies of scale, producing enough to get the cost low enough to make a profit. Those natural monopolies usually come in the form of utility companies. Those are going to be the gas company, the electric company, the water company. Here in Flag, we only have one of each, right? Why? Because there's only enough money to allow one to make a profit. There just isn't enough money in the water market or the electricity market or the gas market here in Flagstaff. Can you imagine how much money it takes to lay all of the infrastructure, the pipes, the plants, the distribution lines to get those things to everybody's house? Can you imagine if a second company tried to come in and dig up all of our streets and lay a second set of water lines or electricity? It doesn't make sense, right? We're not going to talk about those. We're going to talk about the monopolies that would find themselves as a monopolist for either the first or the third reason on this list. Revenue of a monopolist. We start with revenue, then we talk about cost, then we talk about profit. The demand for a monopolist good is equal to the market demand. Well, why can we say that? Because you're the market. You're the only supplier in the market. So when you think about the demand facing you and your good, well, the demand in the market. Because you're the only one supplying goods to that market. So the demand curve's yours. You can have it. A monopolist price, they find that on the demand curve, is equal to average revenue. Price is always equal to average revenue unless you're selling something at different prices, which we'll talk about that at the very end. But if a monopolist is selling all their goods at the same price, which they're going to find on the demand curve, is going to be equal to average revenue. The demand curve is equal to average revenue, which when we think about perfectly competitive firms, if we think back to last week, do you remember the demand curve for perfectly competitive firms is perfectly horizontal, perfectly elastic? Remember also that it was equal to average between perfect competition and monopoly is A, what the demand curve looks like, and B, what the marginal revenue curve or line looks like. So in this case, the demand curve is equal to average revenue. It's downward sloping because it's the market demand curve. And marginal revenue is always less than the price. So instead of marginal revenue being equal to the price, which it was with perfect competition, marginal revenue is always less than the price. Bear with me, we'll look at some graphs, we'll run some numbers. Hopefully it'll become apparent. All right, so let's look at this little graph here. This is an example from your book. Your author has chosen diamonds as an example of a monopoly market structure. He's sort of right. It's not as much of a monopoly as it used to be. The De Beers family owned most diamond mines in the world. That's control over an essential resource, right? You can't make 1 carat diamonds if you don't have any diamond mines. So if you buy up all the diamond mines, you don't have any competition. It's not quite that high of a percentage. They really don't have 100% of the market anymore. They have 72 or something like that. But it's a pretty darn good example. What we're going to look at is the impact on a monopolist if they decide they want to sell an additional unit of their good. What happens to them? Under perfect competition, if you wanted to sell an additional unit of your good, you just did, right? It was at the same price. Your bushels of wheat were all $5 a piece, right? Yeah. It's a little different with a monopolist. So diamonds is our example. If we look at our demand curve, downward sloping right here, also equal to average revenue. At the price of $7,000, the demand curve says I would sell 3 diamonds. If I want to sell an additional diamond, what do I need to reduce the price of diamonds to? $67.50. I need to reduce the price of all the diamonds to $67.50. That's how I'm going to sell 4. You and I told them that. Because that's our data on that demand curve, right? It's what you and I are willing to pay for goods and services at different prices. So the monopolist knows if they want to sell an additional unit, they have to reduce the price because they're dealing with a downward sloping demand curve. Well, something interesting happens is that revenue is obviously going to change. The money coming in the door is obviously going to change. But we're going to do an interesting analysis. Because every time a monopolist wants to sell an additional unit, they experience both a loss and a gain in revenue that we net together to figure out what's really happening to them. Bear with me. A monopolist would gain revenue by selling an additional unit, but they would lose revenue because they have to reduce the price of all units, including these 3 units they could have sold at a higher price. What is the gain in revenue for this monopolist by selling an additional unit, just the area there in the blue? You'd have to take the area. What's that? $67.50. Base is 1 times height is $67.50. You gain revenue of $67.50. But you also had to sacrifice some revenue in the meantime, right? You had to reduce the price of those first 3 diamonds. So what was the loss in revenue that you experienced at the same time? $7.50. 3 is your base, your height is $250, $7.50. You had to mark down 3 diamonds by $250 apiece. So what was your change in total revenue? $6,000. A positive $6,000. Is that worth the sacrifice? Yeah. What do we call this number? What is this number? It's marginal revenue. Marginal revenue. On the previous slide, the last statement said marginal revenue is less than the price. Marginal revenue is always less than the price after the first unit sold, because we always have to account for some sort of a loss in revenue because we have to decrease price in order to sell additional calculate marginal revenue besides taking the areas of our gain and the areas of our loss? Any thoughts? What's the total revenue we would have earned by selling 3 diamonds? The total revenue from selling 3 diamonds. What's that? 21,000. 3 times 7,000. What's the total revenue from selling 4 diamonds? 4 times 6750. 27,000. Do you think there's a coincidence here that the change in total revenue is 6,000? No, because that's how you define marginal revenue. How much did total revenue change? That's a quick double check for you, right? Okay, good. So just keeping in mind, if a monopolist wants to sell an additional unit, they have to reduce the price. That's really the important takeaway. So we've seen numbers like this before. Let's just go over what you're looking at. 1 carat diamonds per day. You can sell 0, you can sell 17. We know we're going to sell somewhere in between just because we've already run the numbers. Price. Where did we get this price from? Here's the quantity. Where did we get the price from? It's on the demand curve, right? You and I decided that if we were going to buy 10 diamonds, they have to be priced at $52.50. You and I decided this. Okay? These first 2 columns are your demand curve information. Okay? Total revenue, we're just multiplying. The quantity we're selling times the price we're selling it for. That's the total amount we're bringing in the door. That last column, marginal revenue. How much is revenue changing? How much is total revenue changing? When we increase quantity by 1 unit, you can see when we go from here to here, our marginal revenue is $1,500. I don't know where we're going to stop selling diamonds, but I know I'm not selling these 2, right? This one doesn't bring in any additional revenue, and this one actually starts to chip away at my revenue. I know I'm not producing those 2, okay? We haven't added cost onto here. That's why I can't tell you exactly how many diamonds we're going to produce. But we're going to get there, okay? What you are looking at the top graph here is demand, average revenue, and marginal revenue. This, under perfect competition, turned into this under monopoly. When you look at the graphs you're going to see today are going to look very reminiscent of the ones you saw last week. Biggest difference between the 2 is what your demand curves look like. The biggest difference between the 2 is marginal revenue. Now it has its own line that sits under demand, under price. It's just a different scenario, okay? Monopolists are price makers, right? Yeah, they get to choose a price and decide how many they want to sell. Under perfect competition, right, we were given the price, and then we just decided we wanted it. This is the biggest change from the graphs you saw last week. It's really the only change from the graph you saw last week, is that demand, average revenue, marginal revenue, that look like that perfectly horizontal elastic demand curve, turned into these 2 guys here. That's the difference, okay? The rest of the graphs remain the same. The rest of the curves remain the same. The way you analyze the graphs remain the same. This is the biggest difference, okay? Here's our total revenue line, okay? Total revenue increased to 16 units. We saw that on the previous slide when we were looking at the last column. We actually saw revenue increase, maxed out at 60,000, and then it began to drop again as we got into the inelastic portion of that demand curve. You've seen that before when we talked about elasticities. Don't worry too much about it. It's just revenue, total revenue. Okay, monopolies are a price maker. We just said that. They choose quantity or price. Quantity or price. And here's why I say that. Is on the demand curve, Quantity and price are a set of coordinates. You look at quantity, it's going to tell you price. You look at price, it's going to tell you quantity. You can't pick a random price and quantity you want to sell. You have to choose a point on the demand curve. So you get to pick one or the other, and then the other coordinate is then predetermined for you, depending on the information that's already housed on the demand curve itself. Okay? So price and quantity, one determines the other. You can pick one or the other. How does that compare to perfect competition? You can pick one or the other.
You can only pick your quantity.
Good. With perfect competition, your price was given to you, and all you had left to pick was quantity. You were a price taker, not a price maker. All right, profit maximization. What is your golden rule of profit maximization? MR equals MC, right? We find our profit maximizing quantity, level of output, where MR equals MC, okay? Same holds true for the monopoly market structure and the next market structure we're going to talk about in the first part of chapter 10. Total revenue minus total cost is where we need to find the greatest distance or the greatest difference between those two, and that's where we will find our greatest amount of profit. So remember, we talked about this probably the last 2 weeks. First week when we talked about costs for chapter 7, and then chapter 8, and now here we are in chapter 9. Total revenue minus total cost gives us profit. That's just a really simple calculation. If we find the greatest difference or the greatest distance between these two, that's where our profit is going to be the highest. I already said that. Okay? Where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, your golden rule, that's where we find our profit maximizing level of output. It's always the golden rule. It's the reason it's the golden rule is because it holds true for every market structure. All right. You've seen something similar to this. Don't panic. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. Number of diamonds, you've seen that before. Price, where did we get the price? What's that? The graph? Where on the graph? Beautiful, the demand curve, okay? This information was housed on the demand curve. We just listed it. Total revenue, we multiplied these two together. Marginal revenue, how much did revenue change when we sold an additional unit? Here they've thrown total cost in. That's just been given to us. Don't overthink that. Marginal cost, how much did the cost change as we went from one unit to the next additional unit? Average total cost, that's an easy average. We just took our total cost and divided by the quantity. And we got average, it's just a really straightforward average. And then profit or loss, we took total revenue, subtracted total cost, and got our profit or loss. You can see we start with losses, we move into positive profits, and then we move back into losses again. That's typically what we see. Okay? Where do we maximize profit here? Say it again. 10 diamonds per day. Here is where we maximize profit. 12,500 or 10 diamonds per day. Let's think back to that marginal revenue, marginal cost consideration. Okay? We talked about this last time when we talked about the bushels of wheat. But at 10 here, we are making marginal revenue, or the additional money that's coming in from just that diamond is 3,000. And the additional money we're spending, or our marginal cost for just that diamond, is $2,750. So we're getting more than we're putting out in terms of cost. That's a good diamond to sell. But when we get to diamond 11, look what happens. We go from $2,500 in additional revenue, marginal revenue, and then $3,250 in marginal cost. You don't want to sell that diamond. I don't want to produce a diamond that costs me more to make than it brings in an additional income, right? Yeah, that's what we sell. So these graphs should look a little familiar. The only difference between these graphs and the ones you saw last week is that this now looks like this. But our cost curves are the same. So here we have our ATC, or average total cost curve. That's that U-shaped curve. Then we have our marginal cost curve, our check mark. Our marginal cost intersects our average total cost at its lowest point, right? Those two curves look exactly the same as the ones you saw last week. It's the demand curve and the marginal revenue line that are going to look different. Does anybody remember what the three-step process is when trying to analyze for profit maximization? What's number one? You got to know this by next week. Beautiful. Find your golden rule. Find MR equals MC. Because MR equals MC, that's going to be the green line, that's your MR in this case. Your MC, that's your check mark, there in pink. We find MR equals MC. That gives us the quantity at which we profit maximize. Do we care about any other quantity on this graph but that one? Absolutely not. Why would you, right? What is step 2 in the process? Find your demand curve so you can determine the price that you're selling your quantity at. So we determine the quantity, go up to the demand curve, that's step 2 to determine your price. My price is $52.50. Found my profit maximizing quantity, now I have to find the price that goes with it. I find that on the demand curve. What is step 3? Find your ATC. Find your average total cost per unit. That's step 3. In this case, I'm going to go down to hit my ATC. Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
It's a good thing. You want cost to be below price, because then you're making a profit. So I see an average total cost of $4,000. It's less than my price. That's a good thing. What's my profit per unit? $12.50, right? It's the difference between my price per unit and my average total cost per unit is going to give me $12.50 per unit profit. What's my total profit?
12,500.
12,000. Is that what you saw in the previous slide? We maximize profit at 12,500. You could also, what did you do?
I saw that we're selling 10 of them at that price.
And that's how you find it, right? If you were looking at this graph, you take the $12.50 profit and you multiply it by the quantity of 10 and come up with $12,000. Good? There's a lot of questions I could ask about this graph, right? Profit per unit, total profit. What's total cost at 10 units?
Would that just be 40,000?
That would be our total revenue. It would be
40,000.
It would be 40,000, right? We take the 4,000 times 10 and get 40,000 would be our total cost at that quantity. Our total revenue at that quantity would be the 52,500. I could ask you that. A lot of different information that comes off this particular graph. Okay? It's analyzed in the same three-step process we learned last week. Memorize it. No joke. Just memorize it. Okay? Promise you will come in handy. All right, so let's look at the totals. You saw something like this last week, except for the total revenue line that we look at with perfect competition is this perfectly sloped line in the upward direction. Total revenue for a monopolist goes up and goes back down, right? You just can't continue to make positive revenue. We saw that on that big chart with all that data. Here we know that we want to find the greatest vertical distance between total cost and total revenue, where cost dips below revenue, because this is positive profit, this is a loss, this is a loss, this is positive profit. Greatest vertical distance comes here at 10. Okay? What's our fixed cost in this operation? 15,000. You should be able to tell me that too, right? What is your total cost when you're producing 0 units? 15,000, that's my fixed cost. Good? Great. Short run losses and shutdown. You've actually written all this down before. You did it last week. You've seen it all before. There's nothing new here for you. What was the deal with losing money but continuing to operate? What was the biggest factor that we had to consider? It had to cover variable costs. Your price had to cover variable costs and hopefully some of your fixed, right? Yeah, you wanted to minimize losses. And the way you were going to do that was even if your price didn't cover all your costs, as long as it covered your variable and maybe some portion of your fixed, you were going to continue to operate in the short run. That's all this says. You've already written this down somewhere in your notes. If price covers average variable costs, the monopolist will provide in the short run. If not, the monopolist faces shutdown, at least in the short run. So if your price is greater than your ATC, good for you, you're making a profit. If ATC is greater than your price, so you're losing money, but at least your price is greater than your variable costs, covering some portion of your fixed, you should continue to operate, at least in the short run. What did you do in the long run? I don't have any idea. I do not have nearly enough data to make that prediction or to come up with a plan for the long run. This just tells us about the short run. If your price does not even cover your ABC, if your price is greater than your average variable cost, just shut down. Remember when we looked at that really big, intricate graph where we had like price 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? This is price 1. Price 1 is below your shutdown point. You're not even going to produce it. Okay? It doesn't even cover variable. So something like this, okay? You have your ATC and your ABC, your marginal cost curve, which intersects them both at the lowest points. There's your new monopolist demand curve, your new marginal revenue for your monopolist. Let's go through our 3-step process and see where we're at here. I find MR equals MC there at point E. What's step 2? Find your demand curve so you know your price. That's going to be up here at point B. Step 3. Find ATC. We got to travel up to ATC. Is that a problem? That's a problem. Okay? We're definitely losing money. Should we continue to operate in the short run? Why? Did I hear you say it? Cover variable costs, right? It's above variable costs. So here's your variable cost curve right here. Your price is above that. Great. I'm sorry. That would have been right here. Right? Your price is above ABC. You should continue to operate, at least in the short run. We're not sure about the long. Okay? All right. Awesome. All right. Long run profit maximization. So short run versus long run. I think the last thing on your worksheet says something like, what other market structure, oh no, that's the chapter. Monopoly, what's that? What is the potential for monopolies to earn a profit in the long run? What'd you put? Beautiful. It's not that relevant. Remember how with perfect competition you could earn a profit, you could lose money, but in the long run you were only gonna what? Normal profit, zero economic profit. This is different. Because if you remember what eroded your profits in this market structure, that if you were making profit, somebody was going to come into your market and take it away from you. Can anybody do that to a monopolist? No. You could make profit as far into the future as you possibly can if you are a monopolist. Okay? That's the beauty of it. You're insulated. You have no competitors, at least right now. So, it's a good thing for monopolists in the long run. You can earn profits. All right. We're sort of switching gears a little bit. We're going to talk about something called price discrimination. Price discrimination is an interesting thing. Something that monopolists do frequently. They offer different people the same good at different prices. There are places all over this town in which I pay more for the pay more for the exact same good that you get at a lower price? Movies.
I was gonna say Sprouts.
Why Sprouts?
Because like it's all natural. And like if you go like Walmart, you're like,
But I'm joking about me and you
oh,
specifically. Do you pay less at Sprouts for stuff than me? No, it's the same. So same exact good. Somebody say movies? Where else? Why do you say the grocery store? I can have a value point card.
But like some people don't have those.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Restaurants,
Why?
because some restaurants give senior discounts or child discounts,
Or
or student.
student discounts, right? Where else? So restaurants, the movies, what's that? The bus, because you get on it for free. Good. What else? There's all kinds of stuff. You guys pay less for. Does it Dutch Bros, right? Don't do student discount at Dutch Bros? I heard about this recently. Oh, it's high school?
Well, that's what you told me.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying in the language way, but yeah, there are places all over this town that you get the same exact thing cheaper than I do. What is it? What is it with you that you get the cheaper price? What's that?
we have less money.
You have less money. There's something to this, right? Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if it's because we're more elastic to the price.
I was hoping somebody would say that, right? You have a higher price elasticity of demand for those goods than I do. What they're saying is that you are more sensitive to pricing than I am. That the price of a movie ticket will actually determine how many movie tickets you buy, and they don't think it's going to determine how many movie tickets I buy. They think I'm less sensitive to changes in movie price. Are they right? Kind of right.
If you're making more money, I'd say they're right then.
You're making more money, I would say they're right too, right? What they have done is they have found categories of people that have higher price elasticity of demands for their good, offer them a lower price in order to increase profits. The fact is, I don't actually even know what the price of a movie ticket is. I don't know. You might know, right? Yeah? How much? $7? Is that right? Who else gets lower prices than me besides students? Seniors? Veterans? And kids. All categories of people. The veterans are a little different. I think there's a little different rationale between giving discounts to veterans, because you can't actually predict how much money a veteran is making, right? By just sort of making assumptions about them. That's more of a service-based discount. Everything else is based off price elasticity of demand. Why are seniors more sensitive to price? Yeah, they're on Social Security, they're on a fixed pension, they have some sort of fixed income. Children, what's to do with children? They're annoying. Yes. Chances are, when you take a kid to a restaurant, or you take a kid to the movies, it's not going to be that pleasurable of an experience for the parent anyway, so you gotta make it cheap. You gotta make it cheaper than hiring a babysitter. Take your kids to the movies. You're gonna spend all the money on ices and crap anyway, so they give you a cheaper movie ticket, right? Same with restaurants. Kids don't eat very much. If you're gonna get the parents to a restaurant, feed their kids cheap, they're more likely to come, right? So we're more, as a parent, you're more sensitive to the pricing of this food that's gonna end up on the floor or thrown away or whatever, than the food that you're gonna eat yourself, right? Yeah, this is an interesting concept, right? So price discrimination is a good thing. It's a good thing. It doesn't upset me that I have to pay more for a movie ticket than those other categories of people, because I understand economics, and I understand price elasticities, and I understand profit, and I understand that a large segment of our society gets more goods because of price discrimination. You get more movie tickets. You get more meals. Seniors get more movie tickets. Seniors get more meals. because I understand the economics of it, it sounds like a really good thing, okay? It is done to increase profits, why else would they do it? There's no other reason. And this is a little beyond what we've talked about so far, but it increases social welfare. Didn't we talk briefly about consumer surplus last week, right? The difference between what you had to pay and what you were willing to pay. What price discrimination does is it creates more consumer surplus for those other parties, those parties who have to pay less, and that's good for society. It's good for social welfare. It also increases the profits of the firms who are doing it. Again, that's their motivation. There are some conditions that must exist in order for price discrimination to be effective. The first one is the firm must be a price maker. A monopoly is a price maker. Harkins is a monopoly, right? Downward sloping demand curve. It must be possible for you to charge different prices. Under perfect competition, you're given your price. You're a price taker. So you can't really price discriminate because you're giving your price and that's the price you sell at. You have to have a downward sloping demand curve in order to make this work. You have to have at least two parties of consumers with different price elasticities of demand. Clearly, they do the research and figure out who those parties are. It's pretty standard. Be able to charge each group a different price. How are they able to charge you a different price? They require an ID count. Seniors, the same thing. You show a driver's license, show you're of a certain age. Kids, right? And you can sort of see that they're kids in most cases. And you have to be able to prevent the lower price group from reselling the product. Why don't you buy movie tickets and sell them to me? Or have you just not bought it? What keeps you from selling that movie ticket to me? What keeps that from happening? There's a couple of things.
There's no specific time it can be used.
Is that true?
That's time sensitive.
Is that true?
Take it for like 3 hours later.
You can buy the ticket for 3 hours later?
I don't think there's a limit on how far ahead.
You can buy it?
Depends when they start selling the ticket.
Okay. What else? What else keeps you from reselling your ticket to me?
I'm gonna use it.
Does it say on the ticket?
It does say on the ticket. It says student on your ticket. It says senior on their ticket. It says child on that ticket. It says military on that ticket. Mine says adult. Right? Yeah. So that's the first thing they do. And they create a very short distance, physical distance between where you buy the ticket and where they take it and tear it. They're trying to move you straight from point A to point B. They don't really want there to be a long distance in which you could create some other transaction. Okay? Yep.
But you can leave though, you can buy a ticket.
You can buy the ticket and leave. I'm not sure how religious the ticket takers are about checking whether it says student or senior or whatever.
I work there, we don't care.
I'll be a student next time. Yeah, that's interesting. Do they ask you to check?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you don't.
I feel like another thing there is just having to buy the ticket in the first place, because that's when you can be able to like buy enough to make it worth selling.
Yeah, there's probably a really small profit margin. Yeah, good point. All right. That is chapter 9. Let's move on to chapter 10. All right, chapter 10, monopolistic competition and oligopoly. We are not going to talk about oligopoly. It is a fourth market structure that we're not going to get into because it's really complicated. We're going to stick here with monopolistic competition. What is in your PowerPoint, what is in your homework, that's what you need to know, okay? And that's going to be monopolistic competition. So this is the third market structure we are going to talk about. It is a hybrid of perfect competition and monopoly market structures. It is probably the most common market structure that you and I would run into on a daily basis. Is going to be monopolistic competition. So, I frequently go through my daily life recognizing all of the economics that is happening around me, just because I'm particularly sensitive to it. So I have a son who's approximately your age. A couple years ago, I said, I'm going to the mall. He said, can I come with? I need a new gray hoodie. Sure. So we get out to the mall. I'm not paying attention. He grabs a gray hoodie. We get up to the counter. I have my card. The lady said, that'll be $92. I was like, wait. I know what's happening. This is monopolistic. Right? What made that sweatshirt $92? Yeah. Had a little white swoosh. Right? Okay. Does Nike have a monopoly on gray hoodies with white swooshes? Are they the only one that can produce that because of licensing and things like that? Yeah. Are they in competition with other gray hoodies? Which ones? Adidas. Under Armour. Right? They're making gray hoodies at Target too. They got some at Walmart. Are they in competition with those ones? Right? They're all gray hoodies. But if you're in the market for a $92 one, right, there's a block of competition. And if you're in the market for a $14.99 one, right, there's this other sort of sub-market, if you will. They're all essentially selling a version of the same good. But they all have a monopoly over their version. In competition, but all these mini monopolies in competition with each other, selling similar goods. Good? Okay. So monopolistic competition by definition, many producers. Think about the gray hoodies, there's all kinds of them out there, right? Low barriers to entry, if I wanted to start sewing them tonight, I could. I'm selling them, no big deal. Slightly differentiated products. We'll talk in a minute how you can differentiate a product from another. But what this means is that if I raise my price, I'm going to lose some of my customers, but not all. Nike takes that hoodie from $92 to $99. They might lose a few of their customers. They're not going to lose them all, right? Some control over price. They are price makers. Nike decides how much to sell hoodies for. Therefore, there is a downward sloping demand curve for firms in this type of market structure because you're all a mini monopoly. So if you're a mini monopoly in competition with other firms, your curves look like a monopoly. You have a downward sloping demand curve just like Chapter 9 monopolies did. You act both independent and interdependent in this market, which means that while each firm is making their own decisions in terms of pricing and style and things like that, you better believe Nike is paying attention to what Under Armour is doing. You better believe Nike is paying attention to what Adidas is doing. There's some interdependency and there's some independency too. Okay? I don't know if independency is actually valid. Okay? How do we differentiate products? There's 4 different basic ways that we do that. The first one is going to be physical differences. That's going to be the actual style of something, the actual color, the actual design. How you differentiate your hoodie from another, right? What fabric it's made of, the quality of the fabric it's made of, etc. The second thing we can use to differentiate ourselves is going to be location. We call those spatial differentiations. The Starbucks located right next to this building isn't different than any other Starbucks, right? But it has a very close place in my heart due to its actual location, right? Services, this can be customer service, this can be a service you're selling. Do you have a service that is more what I'm looking for? Do you have great customer service? I tend to buy stuff from people with great customer service. Whatever. The fourth one, this is how Nike charges $92, right, is product imaging. They've convinced someone it's worth $92, right? And then someone then had to convince me it's worth $92. But that's through promotion and advertising and things like that, okay? Nike's spending, Adidas is spending more than Walmart is spending, right? Advertising. remains constant in these three market structures that we talked about, okay? We maximize profit where MR equals MC. We find that quantity, we go up to the demand curve and find the price. It's a downward sloping demand curve. If price is greater than ATC, good for you, you're making a profit. If your price is less than ATC but greater than ABC, you're losing money, but you should continue to operate in the short run. If your price is less than ABC, less than your shutdown point, you don't want to do it, right? You want to shut down immediately, you're losing money, you're losing more money the longer you continue to operate. You've seen it all before, this is now the third time. All right, so monopolistic competition looks exactly like a monopoly in the short run. I think that's at the very bottom of this worksheet. What other market structure does it resemble in the short run? Monopoly. Okay, look at these curves. This is monopoly right here. You wouldn't know the difference between monopoly and monopolistic competition if I didn't tell you by looking at these curves. Okay, downward sloping demand curve, marginal revenue line that lies beneath. ATC, U-shaped, MC, check mark. It's all the usual suspects. Three-step process. MR equals MC, find your quantity. Step 2, the demand curve defines your price. Step 3, find your ATC. Perfect. In this case, we're going down to our ATC. That's a beautiful thing. We are recognizing a profit because the cost per unit is less than the price per unit. So recognizing a profit. Good. Minimizing short-run losses. Here's the same demand and marginal revenue. ATC, we threw an ABC up there because we think you might need it. Three-step process. MR equals MC, point E. Don't care about any other quantities now. Travel up to the demand curve to find my price. Go find my ATC. Oops, I gotta go up to find my ATC. That's not a good sign. It means I'm losing money. Should I continue to operate? Yes, because the price is greater than my variable cost of my ATC. Okay? You should get good at that process, working through that. All right, let's talk about monopolistic competition in the long run. It looks like a monopoly in the short run. In the long run, it looks like perfect competition. So that last blank on your worksheet should actually say perfect competition. If there's enough profit sitting in the gray hoodie market, you're going to see people join the market. And when people join the market, they start to erode profits, just like we saw happen under perfect competition. And so in the long run, we're going to chip away at profits. Firms are going to exit markets that are recognizing losses, and we're going to end up with zero economic profit, which is also equal to the condition we call normal profit. Okay? So in this case, we're seeing profits in our market. New firms will want to enter. They'll draw customers away from other firms. That will reduce the demand facing each other firm that they took the consumers away from. The profit will disappear in the long run, and we'll end up with zero economic profit or no. Short run economic loss. If we're recognizing losses in that market, some firms are going to want to get out. So firms are going to exit the market. When they exit the market, their customers are then going to go find new firms in the market to buy from. That's going to increase the demand for all the other firms that are left. It's going to increase their demand, shift their demand curve. That's going to be a good thing. That's going to increase prices for them. The loss is erased in the long run, and we end up with zero economic profit or normal profit. So, monopolistic competition, it's monopoly first and competition second. If you look at its name, monopolistic competition. Monopoly first in the short run, perfect competition second in the long run. Just think about the name, right? That'll help you keep it in order.